Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer and director Justin Bettman as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from California, Justin is currently based in New York. He began his career as an art director in advertising before transitioning to editorial and commercial photography. He is the recipient of the Photo District News Emerging Photographer Award, Broncolor's Gen Next Award, and a Cannes Lion. He is best known for his ongoing project Set in the Street, in which he builds elaborate sets out of unwanted materials and furniture, much of which is found right on the sidewalk. After creating the photos, the sets are left behind, where passersby can shoot their own images. Select clients include Adweek, American Express, Atlantic Records, Billboard Magazine, Coca-Cola, Columbia Records, Google, GQ, IBM, IKEA, Motorola, Red Bull Music, and Spotify. Please help me welcome Justin Bettman to our lecture series.
How's it going? I am super excited to be here. So I've broken this presentation up into 3 sections. The first section is passion and kind of talks about how I got into photography and when I first started. The next section is knowledge and kind of how I learned the hard skills that are needed to be a photographer. And then the third section is about marketing and how you use those skills to turn this into a career. So if anyone has any questions as I go, I know a lot of times when you wait till the Q&A at the end, you forget. So feel free to give me a shout if you have any questions. So, boom. So the early days is the first section. So I think a lot of times when you look at a professional photographer, you see the current work they're making and it seems sometimes unattainable to be there, but I think it's really important to see when people were not super experienced and had no idea what they were doing. And so I will show you some of my very early images. I first got into photography because my dad had a DSLR lying around, and I wanted to be an artsy high school kid, and so I borrowed his camera and thought it would be cool to do an old school selfie. And so, yeah, as you can see in this image, I had no idea what shutter speed was, hence why it is pretty blurry. So this is an image from my first real shoot that I ever did. I got a friend and we bought balloons and I was like, all right, let's go out and do some cool concept shoot. And so this was just me messing around with him. I didn't know why he was silhouetted. I didn't understand the idea that if the sun is behind someone and you shoot with a fast shutter speed, that it will make them a silhouette. But then I turned on my dad's flash and this is what it looked like. And and I thought that was really cool because the balloons matched the shirt. Here's another image that I had no idea why he was silhouetted, but I was just following this passion of what felt right to me and what felt cool, and I had no idea what the rules were. And the next awful beginner mistake I made was trying to shoot with a fisheye and an on-camera flash, and I also thought this was really cool. I grew up skating in the 90s and early 2000s and saw fisheyes in a lot of skate videos, so I was like, why not move this to photography? Yeah. And then this was an image I did of a friend at like a youth group retreat, and his eyes were really red from allergies. And then I was like, let me make a PSA on don't do drugs, and let's make this kid a crackhead. And so this is like my first foray into Photoshop and learning what an overlay was. And I thought I was so awesome for making this. So that was kind of me just first experimenting with the camera. I had no idea what I was doing, hadn't taken any photo classes. And my junior year of high school, I started a clothing company where I basically had friends who were more artistically talented than I make designs, and I would get them screen printed on shirts and then sell them out of my backpack. So that's a clothing company. And I would hit up bands on MySpace and ask them if they would wear the clothing for free in exchange for me taking pictures of them wearing it. And so that was kind of my foray into shooting bands, which was kind of the next chapter of these early days. And so initially it started by shooting live shows and shooting bands wearing the clothes live. And then I would find them in the parking lot. If I didn't know them, be like, hey, will you guest list me in exchange for me taking photos? I had this big fancy flash on my dad's camera and it looked professional, and somehow convinced some bands to let me do that. And then I started to realize that I enjoyed taking pictures of them in a more stage setting, so I started doing some of these stage photographs. As you can see in this one, I first learned about lighting a little bit more, and I was very into having the sun come from behind and overpowering the sun and lighting them from in front. This was just me trying to be cool and do some sort of conceptual like growth shot. This was Tech 9, who's like a old school hip hop dude. I was shooting a live concert and found him backstage. This was a local band I shot named Dizzy Balloon. I don't know why there was an umbrella inside a library. That was this really rich kid's house, but pretty psyched on that location. And then I started experimenting a little bit more with Photoshop. This is a composite that I did of this musician, Jeffree Star. So I shot him in my backyard and then shot a plate of a lake and then backgrounds of mountains and pulled a moon from the internet. And here's a band called White Panda. So then the next project that I started to do, or my first real project, was called the Bagel Project. And I was in college, I had a lot of free time, I was at USC, and I wanted to take portraits of people, but kind of had saturated my friends at school, and I decided that I would do this idea where I would give homeless people a bagel in exchange for a story, and if they were cool with it, I would also take their picture. And so that's how this project started. And it was really my first cohesive project that had some sort of concept to it. And it made me realize that doing a project is more powerful than doing a series of like individual images. And it really helped me learn how to talk to strangers. And the other thing is I didn't want it to look like typical documentary work. So I used artificial lighting and had an assistant that would carry around a 5-foot Octabank and a battery pack in their backpack. It was the old Alien B Vagabonds, which were pretty heavy. And yeah. And this was the first project that I ever had published, and it kind of taught me the importance of, after you make work, learning how to send it out to the press and trying to make sure that more people see it than just your immediate circle. Does anyone have any questions so far? How did I start a conversation and get them to take the picture? So initially I wouldn't bring out my camera, which was kind of hard to do when you see like a 5-foot light with my assistant, but I would just start like, hey, how's it going? How's your day going? Would you like a bagel? And that was kind of a good conversation starter. And then just like trying to ask them about their life, have them open up. Some of the people would talk for like 45 minutes or an hour before you got to take a picture. So it was one of those things where I knew I wasn't going in to make 100 pictures in a day. It was like, if I make 5 in a day, that's a win. And also once you photographed one of them, I did a lot of these near Skid Row. They'd be like, oh, I have a friend who would be interested, or let me introduce you to them. And so it would kind of go through like that.
What did your letter look like to get press release?
I think I pretty much explained like, hey, I've been working on this project. I've named it the Bagel Project. And I also wrote up all the like interviews that I did, but basically had like a kind of almost like Humans of New York before Humans of New York, but like a 2 or 3 paragraph interview that I had with these subjects, and then the photographs, and just tried to see who was into it. I used to also call my photography Vinaka photography, hence the awful watermark. That's one piece of advice. Don't watermark your images because it looks real cheap. So after doing the Bagel Project, I wanted to do a series that was more conceptual and more produced, and so I started the series called the Dark Series. And it was really my first introduction into large-scale production and learning how to manage multiple variables versus just showing up and shooting what exists there, but really creating a scene and a narrative. And this is one of the images that I did from the series. This was a collaboration with the photographer Ryan Schutte, and he was pretty instrumental when I first was breaking into the style of kind of showing me how it worked. I think there were 8 lights in this shot, and just even I knew I wanted to do a concept of parents fighting in the window and then kids outside getting into trouble because the parents aren't paying attention. And it was his idea of like, all right, well, let's just drive around the neighborhood and knock on someone's door and offer them $200 to shoot in their house and see if they're cool with it. And then kind of using our resources to come together with lighting equipment. I had some, he had some, so together we had a lot. And then learning how to cast and using a casting website to find these subjects. This is a behind the scenes from that day. Here's another shot. This was shot in San Jose, California. Yeah. Do I ever get permits for any of this? I'm probably the wrong person to ask for that. I don't know if I've ever gotten a permit unless it's been like a super commercial job. But yeah, this one I actually had a smoke machine behind that and then lit it just at the very end to get a plate of that. But yeah, I shot at like 5:30 in the morning in like the suburbs of Silicon Valley, so I didn't have any issues. This was literally like a no budget shoot. The BMW was my friend's dad's car. And she's like, yeah, I can drive it there. And then he was like, actually, you're not driving that car, but you promised your friend I'd be here at 5 in the morning. So he drove up with the car at 5 in the morning for me. And yeah, the girl was just a friend of mine. Here's behind the scenes of like how some of these bigger sets are lit. And here's the final photograph from that one. It's a soldier returning home from war and realizing his wife found someone else. And here's the behind the scenes of another one. And this was in a sorority house at my college. Yeah.
So, in order to do all this,
The question was, am I balancing continuous lighting or am I using strobe? For this whole series, actually, everything was lit with strobe. So if you see here, there are 2 lights coming from the side, but there's also a light boomed up behind the overhead lamp, and that's being used to look like a motivating light source to make you feel like it's coming from the lamp, even though it's actually coming from right behind it. And that was another thing I learned throughout the series, is using motivating light sources. When I first started shooting and some of those early band photographs, I was shooting into the sun with a light, and so later on I realized that whenever you add a light source, you want it to feel like it's coming from somewhere. So in this next photograph, I had a light outside of the window that's supposed to look like sunlight hitting him, and I had a flash bulb in that lamp that's supposed to make it feel like light's coming from there as well. So I like to use light to tell a story and to make you feel like it's coming from somewhere. So the next section is knowledge. And so after I went to school, I got a job at Ogilvy and Mather, which is an ad agency, and I started out doing a rotational program with them, and eventually ended up as an art director. And through this time, I was shooting a lot of my own work, but I was also learning a lot about how photographers actually make a living as working photographers, especially in advertising. And so that's kind of what this stage was all about for me. And so initially, as an art director, I was coming up with ideas, but I would be on set and I would be telling the photographer, well, what if a little bit more light was coming from the back? Or what if the tripod was a little bit higher up? And then I realized, hey, we hired these photographers for a reason, let them do their own thing. But there was this voice inside my head that was like, hey, I want to be the person shooting these. And so initially I got to shoot some like smaller social campaigns, and eventually it kept growing. So here's some work that I did when I was at Ogilvy. This is for IBM. This is a pitch for Diet Coke. This was for Lenovo for their tablets. And while I was at Ogilvy, I had a really good creative director who I feel like also helped me develop a sense of taste and understanding why certain work was good, and trying to refine my palette as a photographer and develop a style within there, which I thought was really important as well. This is for Citizens Bank. Any questions right now?
for these, are you the photographer as well?
I was a photographer for all these, yep. This is for IBM. This was with Dale Earnhardt Jr. This was my first like real celebrity shoot. I think for almost all of these, it was with either a Canon 5D Mark II or a Canon 5DS. There's a couple jobs that I rented a phase camera, but That was kind of the majority of the gear I was using. And then for the dark series, I was using Alien Bee lights, which are really cheap and affordable as far as strobes go. And then more recently, you'll see most of that work is shot with Broncolor. And on some of the shoots like this, there was a TV shoot going on, and then I would shoot photos on that set. So that was a good experience for me, shooting on a larger scale production and seeing what it looks like when there's 100 people on set. Yes. So the question is, what is my job as a photographer when I'm shooting on a TV set? So a lot of times on a bigger motion set, when they're shooting a broadcast commercial, they'll also need stills for print ads, and there's not enough time or resources for us to build a separate set. And so a lot of times I'll have to shoot with the lighting that they already have set, and I'll have time to direct the model, and I'll have my digital tech and all that, but we'll be using their existing set and their existing lighting. And so sometimes that poses challenges because when you're shooting motion, if you're shooting at f2.8 and they're shooting at 1/50th of a second and our ISO is 1600, that doesn't translate so well to stills. So sometimes that can be tricky. Sometimes you also have the ability to light it separately or supplemental to what the lighting was for the TV set. And so a lot of times that is where you produce a better result, and it also feels more ownable to my style because I'm not using the look and feel that the DP set for a motion set. So for this specific one, the set was already built for an idea that they had for the TV commercial, and then it was my idea to have her on her phone, like the battery life for this phone lasts all day. That was a product benefit that we wanted to show. So I used the existing set that was already built. But on some of my advertising shoots where it's not with a TV commercial, then I'll be working with a set designer or production designer to build our sets. The question was it easy for me to get clients since I was already at an ad agency? And the work that I'm showing you right now was all shot for the ad agency, and it was their existing clients. And so I think that allowed me to get my foot in the door and shoot with a lot larger clients than I would normally have the ability to get if I was just freelance and reaching out to external ad agencies on my own. Are you asking, is there much retouching in this shot? Yeah, in this specific shot, there's almost no retouching at all. Everything was built practically to kind of have this surreal feeling, and the blue and purple light was also intentionally created that way in camera. Awesome. And this was my first real big solo photo shoot. It was the first time that there were like 40 or 50 people on set. I worked very closely with the set designer. There was a big crew. And so this was a big break for me. This was for Motorola. And this was shot in Spain at an architect's house. We were doing like 7 or 8 setups a day. So I was also having a separate crew pre-light the next set before I got there. Yeah. The question is, how do I have a crew light before I get there? And the answer for that is I try to work with the same assistants consistently so they have an understanding for my look and feel and can hopefully know exactly what I want. And I think for a lot of photographers, the assistant plays a very big role from a technical standpoint in setting that look and feel. For better or for worse, I think I'm pretty involved with lighting for my process, so I micromanage that to some degree. But yeah, that you do make changes once you show up, but at least the baseline is kind of set. And on a lot of these bigger advertising shoots, there's a prep or a pre-light day where you can kind of go through and say, these are the angles that we're going to be shooting. This is our game plan for lighting. But for instance, this was shot outside, so clouds might change, this might happen. So you have to be flexible and adaptable and problem solve. This was also for Motorola. And this one was for Lenovo. And so while I was doing all these advertising shoots, I enjoyed doing it. I was getting a lot of experience, and I had the resources to pull off some of these larger shoots that I wouldn't have for a personal shoot. But I also had this itch to create more personal work that was not for a client. There were no rules. I could do whatever I wanted. And so at the time, I became friends with this set designer, and we were discussing, what would be a fun project to do together. And I came up with this idea of like, what if we built sets, but instead of building them in a studio, because I can't afford to pay for a studio every time, what if we built them on the street? And instead of I mean, when you're shooting in a studio, but you're shooting a set, all you're really paying for is a back wall and a floor, and shooting against jacks. So why don't we just use existing walls that exist? And that is how the idea of set in the street came about. So this was the first one that we did. And if you look at the first shot, it looks like it could be a living room. And then when you pull out, you see, wow, this is actually shot outside on the street in Bushwick. And this project taught me a lot about the power of set design and how that can really elevate an image. And at the end of the day, no matter what you're shooting, the content that you're shooting has so much to do with the final image. So if you can put a lot of thought into the process of building and creating a beautiful world, taking the picture is really easy. And so while I was doing this shoot, you can see there were a lot of passerbys. Everyone was kind of curious what's going on. To answer your question, this was not permitted. But I think people assumed that who would be crazy enough to build this outside without a permit. So I was like, sweet, let's run with that. But people kept asking, hey, can I take a picture in your set? Can I take a picture in your set? And unfortunately, there was like just a perfect 20-minute window where the light was good. But I kind of had an epiphany of, what if I turn this into something that anyone can take advantage of? And what if I leave the sets up? So that's what I did for this next one, which was shot just around the corner from that. And so after I did the shoot, I left it up. So anyone who wanted to take a photo on the set could take a photo. And there was a little hashtag that said, take a photo, hashtag set in the street. And so, yeah, it was very interesting to see what people did when you kind of gave it back to them and made it their own canvas. And a little anecdote about this photograph is that the blue balloon was actually not initially a prop, but that's the perk of shooting outside, is that it slowly floated by, and you can see it's not fully inflated, but grabbed it and gave it to him, and yeah, made for a great shot. Also his mustache, one of those $1 tape-on ones. These were all people who were casted, and I use the site castingnetworks.com a lot to find people, and these people all volunteered their time. It was a personal art project. I didn't really have a budget, but they believed in it. And so, yeah, it's really amazing. If you team up with people who do need photographs of themselves, it's a win-win for everyone. So the question is, where do I get the items for the set? And I'm an extremely cheap person, so when I started the project, I was living in a big loft building in Bushwick, and people were always moving in and out. And so all of these items were found furniture. And I had a friend just around the corner from me who had like a big backyard with a sliding gate, and he gave me the code. And I would store things there for like up to a month at a time and try to curate it so it would all fit together. And then when I was ready to do a shoot, go out and do the shoot. So yeah, here's a behind the scenes from this one. The girl on the left is Gozde. She helped with the first few of these with the set design. And on the right is my girlfriend, Marissa, back there, who's helped me on all of these. And so for the next one, I was like, well, I want to do a blue tiled wall background. I feel like it's going to be hard to tile a wall, so I used Google Street View to try to find the perfect wall, and bazing. Did you have a question, my friend? Is there a meaning behind it? They're meaningless. No, yeah, I think for me with this project, initially it did start from a production standpoint of not being able to afford a studio, but as the concept grew and the idea of having a cropped and shot and then a wider one, my idea with this is that when you only see the smaller piece of a larger picture, you're often misled in how things can be illusions. And so when you only see the close-in shot here, you really do think it's just someone's bathroom. But then when you pull out and you see there's trash on the street, it kind of makes you question things. And you'll see there's permits on the light post. That's not from me. And so the set here only lasted a couple days because I guess they started shooting a film and didn't want a bathtub in the shot. Yes. The question is, are they shot completely with natural light? And the answer is yes. One of the decisions I made was I'm shooting in available and free locations, and I'm shooting with primarily found and unwanted furniture. And initially I was thinking, should I set up a big 12 by silk? And then partly because of production reasons and not wanting to get in trouble for permits, but also because I wanted it to almost be like a democratized project where anyone could have taken this, free furniture, free locations, and available light. Yes. I was absolutely concerned about bed bugs and didn't want to have any bad press come out about that. But yeah, I treated the couches for bed bugs before I found it. And I also tried doing this crazy thing where you like wrap it in plastic so it would suffocate any bed bugs. But Yeah, so far as I know, no bed bugs. And on the subject of websites, Chris Allen and Michael Cavalier, who are here, built a really cool interactive website for setinthestreet.com. So if you check that out, it's pretty cool. If you hover over the image, it will pull back and reveal the wider set, which I thought really elevated the project. Any guesses where this is? Boom, Times Square. So this was the first commission piece I had from this. It was right after New Year's, and I received an email from the Times Square Alliance being like, hey, we saw your project. We want you to do this in Times Square, and we want to commission you to do it. And I first thought, which one of my friends made a fake email and is just trying to prank me, because no way is anyone paying me to do this guerrilla art. But it turned out to be real, and it was pretty awesome showing up at 3 in the morning in Times Square as drunk people were stumbling home and the sun started to rise, and then shooting this. And this was the first international one I did. This one is in London. This one was logistically challenging because if you litter in London, it's called, like with furniture, it's called fly tipping. It's up to a $500,000 fine. So this one I did end up permitting, but I went to the permit office and explained to them my project, and they ended up sponsoring it, so I didn't have to pay. So that was pretty cool. And the books you see here are from the Venezuelan consulate. I thought I maybe wanted to do a library scene and post on Facebook, and a friend of a friend of a friend was like, hey, I work for the Venezuelan consulate and we're throwing away like 20,000 books. Do you want any? I was like, I'll take just 1,000 of them. And so, yeah, that's what happened with this one. So the question was, can I talk about how I casted this internationally? And it's from my girlfriend, so I think she knows the answer, but thinks it's a good story. So this one was casted because I was on the street. It was the night before. I had everything in line, and I had permitted it for a specific time, and I had to do it. And so I just started asking random people, like in the train station. And this guy was looked the part for what I was going for. And then he was like, yeah, I'll do. I showed him the photos on my phone. He's like, so when do you want to do it? And I was like, at 5 a.m. tomorrow. He's like, oh boy. I know I just agreed, but do we have to do it that early? I was like, 5:30? He's like, all right, fine, you got a deal. So I was like, can you give me your phone number and someone that you live with phone number in case you don't answer? Because there's a lot relying on this, but fortunately he showed up. And this one was shot in Moscow. They were doing an exhibition, this public art exhibition in Moscow. And they had seen the work I did for Times Square, and they were like, hey, can we show some of the work that you've shot with this public art? And I was like, what about if we fly me to Moscow and shoot it? So this was shot in Moscow. And the sign in the bottom right says, take a photo, hashtag set in the street, but it's all written in Russian. Yeah, good question. So the question is, were most of these shot in the morning for lighting purposes? When I first started the project, the first two I did during sunset, but then I realized if I'm doing these without a permit, probably better to do it during sunrise. So yeah, they're all shot during sunrise or sunset, but yeah, a lot of times I'll load in at like 3 in the morning and shoot at 6 while the sun's coming up, and then just peace out. This was set in the street, done in Prague. There was a production company in Prague that had seen the other ones that I'd done, and they were like, hey, we love the project. Would you be willing to do one here? And I was like, if you want to produce it and make it happen for me, let's do it. So that was pretty awesome. And a fun story for this is that I asked I asked the wardrobe stylist if they could find clothes similar to what they're wearing. And they're like, hey, we went out and looked and couldn't find it, but is it okay if we have it custom tailored over the weekend? I was like, if you can make that magic happen, let's do it. So both the girl and the guy's outfit were both custom made over a weekend. The question is, prior to this shot, how did I get the outfits? For a lot of them, it was me going to thrift stores and just trying to find cheap outfits. For the Times Square one, since there was a budget, I had I had a wardrobe stylist who helped on that one. So the question is, do I storyboard for each shoot? I'm like really awful at drawing, like probably worse than a first grader. So sometimes I'll try to storyboard, but a lot of times it's just kind of picking up on the person's body language and energy on set and then playing with that. Especially with this project, there's like very limited time where the light is right. So typically there's only a couple things I'm trying out on set and then hoping for the best. This girl was like pretty bummed out because I guess there were a lot of flies around and they like the color yellow. because we're like right by the water. So she was just like shooing them away and was pretty fed up with the shoot. So I was like, let's play into that. And then this boy was just fun and awesome. So yeah. The question is, how do I location scout when I am doing them internationally? I think it's different for each situation, but a lot of times I'll try to find something that's iconic to that place. Because if you're shooting in front of a brick wall, then it could kind of be anywhere. So that's kind of been one of my criteria for each set in the street, is try to have something that makes it feel ownable to that space if possible. So that's why here the Prague Castle's in the background. That being said, it's also usually the hardest place, or like spots to permit. Like Times Square is not an easy place to get permission to do a set for 5 days. So it's kind of a balance of that, but trying to make something that's ownable to a specific spot. And then this past April, I had the opportunity to work with Photoville in Los Angeles and United Photo Industries, and I got to do this one. And I tried to have a live tiger, but apparently they're pretty hard to get permission for in public parks. So I had to settle for a taxidermy one. I think like one of 2 taxidermy tigers that exist in the United States. Sweet. So I think that wraps up Set in the Street, and I want to show you my next personal project called Scenes of New York. I grew up in California and had a perception of what I thought New York was like, and when I moved here, certain things were totally different, but certain things hadn't changed at all in my mind. And so I wanted to capture these things that were quintessential New York moments or scenes. And so after I shot the photographs, I shared them with friends. I was still working at Ogilvy at the time, and had them write scripts to these stories. So the idea was that it would create these motionless movies where you listen to these audio stories played back with the images. And so I did 7 main scenes with different images throughout there. And this taught me a lot about doing production and elevating lighting in these locations. Was Set in the Street, it was available light. But these ones, I feel like I really started to find my personal voice with lighting in personal work. And as far as locations go for this, it was similar to what I had learned with Ryan, where it was like knocking on a barbershop's door and being like, hey, can I give you $300 to shoot in here? Like, what's your slowest day of the week, and what's a good 2-hour time period? Having friends assist me and just kind of going through like that. And through this work, I tried to have like advertising level of production value, but still doing it on a personal budget, which was an interesting challenge. This kind of has Norman Rockwell inspiration in it. These are also casted, also using casting networks. And then I did the wardrobe for almost all of these, and had some buddies help out with lighting and everything. So this one I'm going to play the audio.
Hey, do you see that tall glass of milk and glasses over there? I could use some of that calcium. My bones are brittle.
Oh, that's gross.
I'm giving you advice on how to pick up cute guys at the laundromat.
No hitting on that man until you finish your laundry.
You're no fun, honey. I've been doing this for years. I can multitask.
The only things I want to see you picking up is that elephant. Can't believe you still have a stuffed animal, Mom.
It's my emotional support stuffed animal, and his name is Edwin. My therapist says it's important to keep him around until the divorce is finalized.
Don't you dare drop your bra on the floor to get his attention.
It's a solid move. It's worked at least 3 out of 8, 9, 17 times.
That's not a good success rate. And we don't have any more coins to do another load.
Oh, you think too much about math and school. Have some fun. You know, I was pretty excited when I found what I thought was your nudie magazine collection in your room. But then it turns out it was your anatomy book.
All my friends' moms would be proud of their daughters for being first in their class.
I am so proud. You're my best friend and I love you. But don't you want me to find you a new dad?
I don't need a new dad, Mom. I love you so much. You're the only parent I want.
Thanks, hon. You're all I need, too. How about we go home and I make you dinner?
That sounds nice.
But first, I'm gonna go ask that guy if he wants me to take off his shirt and throw it in with our wash.
Mom!
All right. Slightly inappropriate, but pretty funny. And all these audio stories and everything's available, and that was also built by Chris and Cavs. Cool website that plays the images with the audio. A lot of people ask if this image was a real scene, but this is also, everyone was casted except for the bike delivery dude in the back right. That was just a happy moment. So I had friends write scripts for the audio, then I casted voiceover artists, recorded that, and then I also worked with a sound composer named Malcolm Lazaro, and he did the kind of the background that made it sound like a laundromat. And then in February, I did a show with this work. This is Jerry Saltz. He got to come out and check it out. This was at spring break. Awesome. And so the next section, the last section, is about marketing. I think a lot of times we spend so much time trying to create amazing work, but unless people see the amazing work, it doesn't really matter. It needs to get out there, whether that is you trying to get an editorial client or advertising client or land an agent. Anytime you make work, it's super important to market it and to make sure that the right people see that work. And so I finally decided I wanted to leave Ogilvy. I kind of set a timeline for myself. And I knew that it was a lot easier for me to get editorial work versus getting advertising work, especially if I was still working at Ogilvy. It was kind of a conflict of interest to shoot other advertising work. So I decided that I wanted to kind of go into the celebrity sphere, but I didn't know how to get my first celebrity shoot. So I started to shoot my friends and models that I could cast and tried to make it look like they were celebrity shoots. So these are some of those early shoots. And I'd seen a lot of like Hollywood Reporter photos where it's against a flat. So I was like, I'm going to build my own flat and make it look like a Hollywood Reporter photo. And then I'd seen a lot of people shoot against a hand-painted background. So I was like, I'll paint my own background and shoot it in my backyard or on my fire escape. And this was a collaboration I did with my friend Nate, where we built a little set and lit it with some colored lights, which was fun. And then a friend of mine started dating an actress who was in The Walking Dead and a couple other TV shows. She wasn't super big, but that was my first like mini break into the celebrity world. And then after reaching out to a ton of different magazines and outlets, I finally got my first break with like a real celebrity shoot, and that was with Aziz, and that was for the magazine The Wrap. And this first shoot taught me a lot. I didn't realize how little time you usually have with a celebrity. So I had to do 3 setups for this one, and I had 15 minutes. So that really taught me how important it is to be really prepared and to make people, especially actors, feel important and feel good and be able to fall into the role that you need to capture them in immediately. And then another thing that I learned with shooting celebrities is a perception of how sexy it is versus how much you actually get paid. I think I made like $50 on the shoot after I paid my assistant and equipment. So it's just one of those things. I think the higher up you get, you can make more money, and you can also syndicate the images, which means you sell them to other outlets after they've been shot. But I think the perception versus reality of celebrity is always interesting. That being said, I think your perceived value to other clients makes you seem a lot higher if there's been celebrities who have trusted you to shoot them. And so to me, that was still worth it. This was right after Stranger Things came out with David Harbour. He had just messed with his Achilles heel or something and couldn't walk. So it was pretty hard for me on a no budget to find a location in New York that felt somewhat like Stranger Things that would let us shoot there for free. But I found this place. And this is a cast of Pose. This was for Time Out New York. This is Jeffrey Wright from the show Westworld, and he's done a lot of other stuff. Yes. So the question is, how do you get an actor or celebrity to do something a little off or odd? I think a big thing is to just continually shoot and see what happy accidents or moments happen when they're not so guarded. I also had him for a lot longer than I do for most celebrity shoots. And this was actually shot on the morning that Anthony Bourdain committed suicide, and he was good friends with him. So I think his mood in this photo is just kind of reflected from that moment. Yeah. So the question is, when shooting actors, how often do you just kind of have to roll with the situation? I think almost all the time. You always need to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and just kind of go with it. I had a shoot today with an actress, and her outfit was kind of busy, and then she decided to put on a jacket that was even busier with the outfit under there, and you just kind of have to roll with it and try to make it look as best you can. And at the end of the day, I think that's at least at the level I'm at, and I think for most photographers, if you're shooting an actor or celebrity, they're the person calling the shot. At the end of the day, like, if they decide that they want something a certain way, it's really not worth fighting. So I think it's a matter of like gaining trust, showing them that at the end of the day, you want them to look as good as possible. You're not trying to do a aha, I gotcha type of situation. And yeah, these people are photographed all the time. And I think trying to make it as quick as possible, because a lot of times they're doing 3 or 4 of these in one day. And just as fun as possible. Play music that they like. Try to make them happy. Make it a positive experience for them. This is Mandy Moore. This is Alden Ehrenreich, the dude who played Han Solo in Star Wars. This was another one where there was no budget for a location, but I wanted to get a good shot, so I reached out to a friend who works in hospitality PR. She recommended a bar that she represents and asked them if they'd be interested in doing a trade for credit, and got to shoot here. This was a fun shoot. This was with Rob Corddry, and I guess he's a Eagle Scout, so he pitched GQ on taking a photographer and a writer camping for a night, so we actually went camping. I got to stay in the fancy tent back here, and he slept in his own pitch tent, and he cooked his hamburgers, and it was pretty awesome to hear campfire stories with that dude. This is Carrie Coon. This was 90 seconds that I had with him. This was shot at South by Southwest, so I was shooting like 50 people a day, 60 people a day. And publicists will tap you on the shoulder and be like, that's it. And you're like, but he literally just sat down. And they're like, cool, sounds like you got the shot. So you just have to roll with that. So I had a goal for myself that before I left the ad agency, I wanted to sign with an agent. And so that was a pretty long process of me meeting with different agencies and trying to see who was a good fit. And I ultimately signed with Anderson Hopkins like a year and a half ago, and it's been really awesome. But it took a lot of me marketing myself to agencies and trying to illustrate, this is the caliber of work I'm doing, these are the clients that I already have, this is why I think I would be beneficial for you and why you would be beneficial for me. And I think that, yeah, having an agent is one of those things that when you're ready, it's a really good way to excel your career. But I think a lot of people think they're ready before they are. I met with Anderson Hopkins a year and a half before I actually signed with them. And it's just all about keeping the conversation going, sending your work out, and just finding something that feels like a good fit. Because it's a lot like a marriage where you talk to them every day and you just want to make sure that there's trust there and you feel like both sides are working hard for each other. And so here's some work that I've shot since signing with Anderson Hopkins. This was a GQ cover for GQ Mexico with David Harbour, so it was cool working with him again after I'd shot that first one. This was for Footwear News. This was for Time Out New York. This was for Adweek. This was for History Channel. For Direct Auto, that's Tanya Harding, Johnny Manziel, and Fat Joe. It was supposed to also have Ja Rule, but he decided he wasn't interested. It's Fat Joe again, or just Medium Joe. He's not that fat anymore. This was for Google, for the Chromebook. Here's a behind the scenes of that. This was in Prague. This is for Adobe. for Le Tigre, streetwear brand. Here's an artist that came to my art show and I thought looked super cool, so I was like, let's shoot. The question is, with having a rep, do they just send you jobs and you just show up? I think the perception is that, and I think the way it was maybe 10 and 15 years ago is that the agents kind of would go around and send you jobs. I think now it's like there's so many qualified photographers that it's still very much a personal relationship, and so they're going out and trying to make sure that people are aware of my work. But I think at least for me, the majority of the jobs that have come through some sort of connection that I knew, and whether that's also someone they knew, and that kind of reinforces and gives me credibility. But they've also just been really good with producing and making sure that when a job does come through, it's run really smoothly. That job that I shot in Prague, I wouldn't have known where to even start with finding a crew and casting people and doing all that. And I think that it allows me to really focus on the photography and not so much the logistics. Marketing is tough because you need to figure out, what product are you selling, AKA you, like what type of photography, and hone that in. But once you have, I think it's trying to figure out who do you want to be shooting for, how do you get in touch with those people, and how do you continually stay in touch with those people, because even if you meet with an ad agency and they do work on Coca-Cola and they love you, they may not have a brief that's right for you in that moment. So it's all about keeping those relationships going. For me, I think having worked at Ogilvy, a lot of those people have left Ogilvy and gone to other agencies, and being able to maintain those friendships and relationships and reaching out and getting meetings through them has been really important. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, people need to like you as a person. So trying to set up meetings, show your work in person, but also just trying to see if you vibe on a personal level is really good. And then I would say also going after editorial or like easier to acquire clients is a good method. If you're only going for the huge ad jobs and you're still in school or just out of school, it's hard for them to trust you over a super established photographer, but a magazine with a $500 budget is going to be way more willing to take a chance on you. Here's a behind the scenes with Daniel Radcliffe. There's the final photograph. Don Cheadle. Some scary Russian boxer. Yes. The question is, do I get feedback from celebrities on my work? For almost every celebrity shoot, there's always a monitor, so they might be like, this looks whack, or this looks great. But no, generally speaking, I don't usually hear from them after the shoot, if that's your question. Sometimes they'll repost the work, which generally is a sign that they didn't hate it. But then there's certain shoots, like I've shot a few, like David Harbour and Carrie Coon. I've shot them both multiple times, so to me that's generally a sign that they like the experience. And I think certain celebrity photographers will be recommended by a celebrity for something, or I just got reached out to shoot a book cover for someone, and I think it's because I had worked with their PR firm before and they liked me, and that's how that worked out. So that's all recent commercial work or editorial work that I've had since I signed with Anderson Hopkins. And then I just wanted to share some of the latest personal work that I've been doing. I've been teaming up with Sean Patrick Anderson, who owns Acme Brooklyn, which is an awesome prop house, and I've been shooting personal work with him. It's been really cool because he has so many amazing resources with the props, and so I've been able to create these fantasy worlds that kind of meld everything that I've wanted with lots of lighting, cool set design, and just the flexibility of not having a client. So these have been a dream to work on. And here's the behind the scenes of that. The question is, are the pulled out shots equally as important as the cropped in shots? For set in the street, I'd argue the pulled out shots are even more important because it really gives context. This right here is just a behind the scenes of me creating it to kind of give some people a idea of the lighting setup and all that. This one? I grew up like juggling and unicycling, and I always wondered what my life would look like if I joined the circus and became a clown, and then became a washed up clown and lived in a basement, and that's what I thought this would be. Do I get to explain the meanings? Sometimes people will ask for artist statements. I don't know if I'm like most people, but I kind of think that photography is like comedy, where if you have to explain what it means, then it's probably not amazing. I know there's a lot of like fine art people who probably think I'm stupid, but I think they're pretentious, so yeah. This is actually a set that I built with Sean as well. Looks like a pretty fancy place, and boom, it's all shot in a studio. Yes. So the question is, do I think about the color before? And yeah, color plays a huge role in my set design, and I'll generally try to create a palette beforehand and try to stick within that. I think it helps give like a stylized look and feel to the work. That's a fake raccoon, if anyone was wondering.
Another question.
Oh, yes. The question is, what is the most amount of lights that I use for my personal work? I'd say it ranges from no lights to like 10 lights. I think in this specific image, there's like 6. I can try to guess or remember where they were, but there's one overhead coming through the deck that's creating these like blue streaks right here. There's a light in here, a flash bulb that I have an orange gel on. There is a light behind me that's filling in the whole scene. There is a light behind him that's kind of filling in this detail and backlighting that. Then there's a blue light back over here, shooting that way. And then there is an orange light lighting the raccoon. And then back here, but you can really barely see it, we decided to light stuff on fire, but didn't really show up too well. Yes. The question is, how does the story, character, setting all come together for these? With these ones that I've been doing recently with Sean Patrick, we'll kind of spitball ideas back and forth. And I think because a lot of these are so set design heavy, that's kind of the first element. And then trying to find a person that seems like it would fit in with there. And then doing wardrobe that builds off of that. This is a shoot I did with this really cool hip hop, like 1970s looking kid named Waffle. That's his house. And I always bring photo equipment with me if I think I might be in a cool location. So I went away for Labor Day, and these were 2 of my friends, and we decided to do a little shoot. There's the behind the scenes. Awesome. Well, I think that concludes my presentation.
Hello. I just have a question about social media and like how that's affected you, and just I find in the past like year and a half Instagram has just like totally been a disaster, and I'm not sure if that has been difficult for you, or have you felt that Instagram has been a trouble? I've been talking to a lot of photographers about this, and like I'm not sure what your opinion is about Instagram or any social media platform.
To clarify, do you mean like on my mental health, or as far as like me getting jobs, or as far as people actually seeing it and the algorithm not working great?
Any of those would be great to answer, because I think that it's been a struggle for all of us as photographers, artists, visual artists. We have to be on Instagram, and sometimes if we don't get seen, I mean, like I'll have posts where I'll have hundreds of likes, and then I'll have posts where I'll have like 12 likes. And I think it's interesting how even the algorithm works.
Yeah, I think that social media is pretty complex. I think to some degree it's really awesome because people are subscribing to choose to look at your stuff. So when I email a photo editor, I'm pushing something on them. But if a photo editor follows me on Instagram, they've opted into seeing my work and chosen to do that. And I think that in that regard, it's really cool. Like someone who I would normally not have access to is seeing my work. And on a mass scale too, however many people follow you. Like if those were all handwritten letters like you had to do 15 years ago or 30 years ago, that would suck. At the same time, I think for your mental health, it's not always good trying to like quantify how awesome something is and how many likes something gets. And I think it's kind of a skewed game because there's certain types of things that will perform well. I can post a mediocre photo of a well-known person, and it will get a lot more likes than a fine art scene that has a pig in it and it's super produced and I spend a ton of time doing, but it's super hard to see when it's like 600 pixels across. I think maybe that's one of my biggest issues with Instagram is that everything you're seeing is so small that if there's a lot of detail, I don't know. When I see my pictures printed 5 feet big and then I see it on a phone, it's just like, especially with a lot of my more complex, larger scenes. So yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things in life that are good and bad, and try to like use it for the good that it has and try not to get too bummed out on the fact that algorithms are weird. And if 12 people liked it or saw it, that's 12 more people than before Instagram. So
Since you do such produced still photographs, are you also being asked by clients to do motion work as well? And can you talk about that?
yeah, I have to some degree fought doing motion work for a while, but I feel like I'm finally caving in. And I think that a lot of times people are like, well, just do motion. And you're like, writing a script, like there's a lot more storyboarding and thought that goes into motion than for stills a lot of times. And the ability to pull off something with high production value for motion is a lot more expensive and difficult than it is for stills. But yeah, I've started to do more of that. I directed a music video last year that was a really good experience for me. And I've been doing more and more motion. I think there's also a pretty big difference between, hey, can you get almost like a GIF or a cinematograph or some small subtle movement versus like, hey, can you direct like a 30-second commercial? Yeah, I also think a lot of times when clients ask a photographer to direct something, they don't have the resources that sometimes it costs to do. Otherwise, I feel like they would go to a director. But yeah, I feel like when I do get those opportunities, it's awesome, and I'm embracing them, and I feel like I've learned a lot from doing more and more directing.
It sounds like a lot of your career, though, was like kind of jumping in and doing things, just seeing how it went. Like, how do you kind of navigate your internal feelings, like, you know, self-doubt and, you know, everything that comes along with that, sometimes not really knowing if the end product's really going to come out like the certain way, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, it's really tough with getting certain opportunities and whether or not you feel ready for it. I feel like I try to surround myself with people who are smarter than me and will make it hard for me to fail and then just jump in. But I think the only way that you continue to push what you're capable of doing is just by doing it. And I've been lucky that a lot of times that's been with someone else's money on like an advertising shoot. And I think as long as you try to set up a system where you can't fail and you can just learn, that's the best way to do it. And then the other thing is trying to do stuff when the stakes are low. So maybe it's not an advertising shoot, but do as many personal shoots as possible when, if things go wrong, the only people that are upset is the model and you. And hopefully learn from those mistakes early on and fail fast so that way you can continue to grow.
And the emotional component, like, how do you ever deal with that? Do you feel like?
Oh yeah, I definitely deal with that. Yeah, I mean, I get like still pretty anxious and a little bit of a stomach ache before like most shoots. And I think it's just a matter of like going in and trying to fake it till you make it and convince yourself that if someone is asking you to do something, it's probably because they see something in you. And even if you don't see that in yourself, try to give them the benefit of the doubt that they made a good gamble on you.
Do you ever have to, in terms of survival, I mean, you do commercial work, but you're very arty. Do you ever have to take unrelated day jobs in order to pay the rent and stuff? Or pretty much are you able to support yourself on what?
So when I worked at Ogilvy, I guess you could consider that a day job. At one point I was doing art direction. At one point I was doing photography, but I showed up to a desk most days. But yeah,
That's
since
related, though, but
what was that?
That's related.
Yeah.
Do you ever have
I've never, I mean, I worked at like a sandwich shop in high school. And then I worked at a commercial bank in college because I thought I was going to be an investment banker and realized that I don't like wearing a suit that much. But yeah, I've been fortunate that I've never worked a traditional like day job as an adult, but there's definitely a lot of aspects of being like a working photographer that aren't super glamorous or sexy, but yeah, I've been super fortunate, and I hope I can continue to do that.
But you felt you stayed true to yourself.
Yeah, I don't think there's, yeah, I guess one thing that, like, tying back to Ogilvy is it was super important for me, and I stayed there for 6 years, which is maybe longer than I needed to, but I wanted to, like, work to a point that whenever I left, I knew that I would be able to have consistent and steady work and not have to work a job I wasn't super keen on. But I think the advantage of working a job that, like, pays you consistently is then you can make work that you care about, and it's not about, if you don't like shooting weddings, and there's nothing wrong with it, but if you jump into shooting immediately and leave your day job, you might be shooting weddings, and you really want to be doing portraiture or editorial. And so I think it's easy to get caught up in saying that, hey, I'm just going to stick to photography. But I think if you have a day job and still stick to doing your own photography, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
An extension of your marketing section. Do you ever pitch ideas to clients, and are they related to your personal work, or are they separate from that?
Yeah, I think I try to create personal work that I think could be applied to some sort of commercial or editorial setting. Some people like taking pictures of poop on a wall. That's not my thing, because I don't think that's ever going to be, like, commercially viable. But yeah, I definitely pitch stories all the time for, like, magazines, and I recently was hired for a campaign based off of work that I had shot on my own. So I think that the best advertising you can do for yourself is personal work, because if it resonates with an art director or a creative director, it can be an easy way into advertising work.
But can you talk a little bit more about what goes into the pitch? Like, what do you send an art director, and how you go about it?
Yeah, so I was hired to shoot a portfolio of drag queens for GQ last year, and I decided I wanted to continue shooting drag queens. So I reached out to Billboard magazine and told them, hey, there's going to be DragCon in September. I'd love to shoot some drag queens for you, and a lot of them, I know that you guys have a section called Billboard Pride. This seems like a great fit. Would you be interested? And they ended up going for it. Yeah, so I got to do it.
So you said you have an agent now.
Yes.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So I know obviously this agent helps you get that work, but if you get work on your own, do you have to route that through the agent, or can you just take that on your own, or how does that work?
I think it's different for every agency, but for me, like, every job, whether it's $250 or $250,000, like, everything runs through them. On my contact page, like, the first contact is them, and they manage everything for me. Okay. So it's one of those things where we didn't want to have a discussion of, well, who brought in this job? Well, I already knew them, blah, blah, blah. And so everyone's just fighting for as much work as possible.
So it's exclusive with that person?
Correct. With the agency?
With
Yeah.
the agent or the agency?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, within the U.S. and Canada.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I get hired in Antarctica, I can use my Antarctica rep.
Were you studying photography in college?
Did I start photography in college?
Yeah.
I started in high school, but I've also never taken a photo class in my life, so there's some, like...
So what was your major in college?
I studied entrepreneurship and business, and I almost went into investment banking.
Ah.
And as much as that's kind of a joke, I feel like having a good sense of the, like, financials and the business side of things has helped pay off, and also, like, a strong math sense is certainly helpful with, like, lighting and understanding ratios, and all of that kind of is playing on in my head subconsciously.
Brother, I'm interested in learning and, like, try advertisement and commercial photography. What will be your recommendation to me to start doing?
I would reach out to photographers who you like, who shoot that type of work, and see if you can assist them. If you have a lot of assisting experience, then maybe you'd get paid to, but even asking them if you can just be, like, an intern on set. I remember my first time being on a big advertising shoot. It was as an art director, but just seeing how that whole system runs, and there's, like, everyone has a very specific role, and within the production design team, there's, like, 6 or 7 people in art department, and they're reporting back to that person, and then there's the hair and makeup and glam squad, and they do their thing, and it's someone's a locations manager, and so it's just interesting to see how all that plays out. And so yeah, if you can reach out to a photographer or many photographers and just try to get your foot in the door and show up on set, I think is a great way.
Who or what are your inspirations for your photo shoots or projects?
That's a tough question. I think
What was the question?
the question was who or what is my inspiration for my projects. I think a lot of people use this answer, but I feel like it's still authentic to me, is that a lot of the imagery that I'm inspired by is from films, and I think especially from lighting. Once I really started to understand lighting, I could never watch movies or TV shows the same again, because I'm always wondering, how is something lit? Why are they using a blue gel for this? Blah, blah, blah. How did they do this tracking shot where they're holding over like a soft light globe while this person's moving? So yeah, I think film is like a big thing for me. As far as like specific people, I'd say like Wes Anderson, Ryan Schutte, Alex Prager, Eric Madigan Heck. Trying to think who else. Yeah, I guess that's a good starter list.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.